Today we're going to look at something that many Montanans have very strong feelings about: property rights. There has just been a landmark decision in Wyoming when it comes to corner crossings. It is a very interesting dilemma that goes back to when Montana became a state. But before we get to that, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. This year we're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers, so your help would mean a great deal to me and the channel. So these land battles aren't something that happened way back in the 1800s. It's something that's going on right now. In fact, I'm reading an awesome book right now. It's called The Crazies, and it's about this very issue with the corner crossings, the checkerboarding of the land, and a battle between landowners and people wanting to use public land. If you love stories about the West, you'll love this book because it talks about the current battle that's going on between cowboys, ranchers, and all the billionaires that have moved into that part of the state. If you would like to read it, I've left a link below in the show notes. And again, so far, I'm not done with it yet, but it's been really good. And if you like Montana and like stories about Montana, this is a good one. So let's take a look at this checkerboarding of the land and the dilemmas that it has created. So just a little disclaimer. Feelings are very strong on both sides of this issue, so don't kill the messenger. I'm not promoting either side, I'm just letting you guys know what's going on out here in the wilds of Montana. So let's start out by talking about how Montana ended up with all this checkerboarding that you can see on the map here. Back in the 1800s, when the railroad was working its way across the country, the government was trying to incentivize them. So they ended up giving them 20 sections of land per mile of track, and they did it every other section was railroad land, and then the government owned the sections in between. They did this to avoid creating large continuous parcels of private land and to encourage the homesteaders to settle near the railroad. So as time went on and the railroad started selling off all these sections of land, you ended up with this checkerboard look that you can see on this map here, which brings us to the dilemma that this checkerboarding has now created. So this particular map right here is of the Crazy Mountains and the area around the Crazy Mountains. And back to that book I was talking about earlier, that's where this whole story originated from. But if you look at the map, all of the sections are in the green are public lands, and then the uncolored sections are private lands. So as you can see in this area, sections 12, 14, and 24 are basically landlocked. In their public lands in the middle of private lands. So the question is access, and that's what this whole book that I showed you earlier is about. The east side of the Crazy Mountains has been bought up by all these billionaires, and now people aren't able to access these public lands because these billionaire ranchers are shutting off access, and you can't really get in there without coming in from the west side on public land and corner crossing to make your way over to section 12 and section 24 if that's where you're trying to get. So this book goes over all the history of these different parcels and who bought it and when they bought it and how they've shut off access, and then the battle for people trying to get in there. And there's a lot more. I could do the whole video just on this book, but I wanted to get to the point that there was a big lawsuit down in Wyoming just recently that was settled, and it had exactly to do with this, with corner crossing, but it was some hunters from Missouri that were hunting down in Wyoming, and they were trying to access a parcel of land that was, again, landlocked between public land. It was a ranch down there. And what they did is they brought a ladder with them because they knew they were trying to get into a certain section that was landlocked. So they got to the corner and they put a ladder over the, from one public land over the fence top into the other public land. Well, the rancher ended up suing these guys for trespassing. Even though they didn't touch the guy's land, he was claiming that they went over his airspace, because if you think about it, where the corner comes together, there's really no way to cross it. even if you don't touch the other land, you're technically going over the land at that exact corner. So as you can imagine, this lawsuit went on for years, but like I said, it was just finally settled, and the judge ruled that no, they were not trespassing. Yes, they did cross his airspace, but because they didn't set foot in the other property, it was not trespassing. And that, I have a drone license, and with a drone, airspace is free. It's public. You can fly over private land with your drone. So I'm guessing that's kind of what the judge was thinking, that, they were barely crossing over his airspace as they stepped over this corner. And is that truly trespassing? Well, according to the judge, no. But that brings us to Montana, where there really hasn't been a decision made yet. It's always been kind of a gray area, and you get conflicting reports on whether it's legal here in Montana. So people say just be careful, beware. But I'm guessing that this lawsuit now has set a precedent. And if there's a big lawsuit here in Montana, I would think it's going to be, unless the people touch the ground or do damage or whatever, I would think it's going to be pretty tough for Montana to argue that this should be illegal now that Wyoming has made this legal. And another effort here in Montana that's going on as we speak, as you know, Montana's state legislature only meets once every 2 years, and they are meeting at the moment. And one of the bills that was trying to get pushed through was they were thinking about selling off these parcels of public land that are landlocked. And in Montana, according to all the reports I've read, there's 1.5 million acres that are in this situation where it's a section of public land that's totally surrounded by private land, and they're trying to allow the ranchers or the people that own the private land around the public land to be able to buy this section of public land, so they get rid of this situation. As you can imagine, hunters and people that love the outdoors and hikers and everybody is definitely against that, because 1.5 million acres is a lot of land, and to get rid of 1.5 million acres of public land, that's kind of what makes Montana as nice as it is there's so much land for people to enjoy, and to get rid of 1.5 million acres is really going to put a dent in the amount of areas you can recreate here in Montana. So if you're thinking about buying a piece of property that is in this situation and it borders at a corner public land, you may in the future have to deal with people crossing it to get to other public land on the other side. But like I said, now that Wyoming has kind of set the precedent, I would be surprised if that doesn't go to Montana and any other state in the West that hasn't come up with definitive laws on this yet. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out. And don't forget, if you're interested in that book I was talking about earlier, there's a link down below in the show notes.
Thank you for watching our video. Please call, text, or email for more information. And don't forget to watch our other videos about Montana.